Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy. Richard Westbrook was about to sign the contract that would merge his luxury hotel chain with Continental Holdings, a deal worth $300 million. The boardroom on the 42nd floor of the Westbrook Tower gleamed with polished mahogany and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. Richard sat at the head of the table, his Mont Blanc pen poised over the signature line. Around him sat his business partner, Vincent Hayes, the Continental Holdings representatives, and a team of lawyers who had spent 6 months negotiating every clause. "Gentlemen," Richard said with a confident smile, "this is the moment we've all been waiting for. The Westbrook Continental Partnership will dominate the luxury hospitality market across 3 continents." Vincent raised his champagne glass in anticipation. "To the future, Richard. To our empire." Richard was about to sign when the heavy oak door opened quietly. Everyone turned to see Rosa Martinez, one of the hotel's housekeeping staff, pushing her cleaning cart into the room. She wore her simple gray uniform, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, and her eyes were lowered respectfully. "Apologies, gentlemen," Rosa said softly in her accented English. "I did not know this room was occupied. I will come back later." "No worries, Rosa," Richard said kindly, recognizing her from the many times she'd cleaned his executive suite. "We're almost finished here. Just give us 5 more minutes." Rosa nodded and began to back out with her cart, but as she passed behind Richard's chair, she stumbled slightly, catching herself on the edge of the table. Her hand briefly touched Richard's shoulder as she steadied herself. "So sorry, sir," she whispered. But in that moment, Rosa leaned close to his ear and said in a voice only he could hear, "Don't sign. It's a trap. Your partner is stealing everything." Richard froze, his pen hovering over the paper. His hand began to tremble. Rosa straightened up quickly and continued pushing her cart toward the door as if nothing had happened. "Richard?" Vincent leaned forward, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Everything all right? You look pale." Richard stared at the contract, his mind racing. Why would Rosa, a simple maid, risk her job to warn him about something she couldn't possibly understand? "I need a moment," Richard said suddenly, setting down his pen. The room fell silent. "A moment?" Mr. Carlson from Continental Holdings frowned. "Mr. Westbrook, we've been over every detail. What's there to reconsider?" "Just a brief recess." Richard stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. 10 minutes. I need some air." Vincent stood as well, placing a hand on Richard's arm. "Richard, we've worked on this deal for half a year. Everyone's here. The contracts are perfect. What's going on?" Richard pulled his arm away gently. "Vincent, we've been partners for 12 years. 10 minutes won't hurt. I just need to clear my head." Before anyone could protest further, Richard walked out of the boardroom. In the hallway, he saw Rosa disappearing around the corner with her cleaning cart. "Rosa, wait," he called out, jogging to catch up with her. She stopped and turned, her face carefully neutral. "Yes, Mr. Westbrook." Richard looked around to make sure they were alone, then stepped closer. "What you said in there about the contract being a trap. What did you mean?" Rosa's eyes darted nervously down the hallway. "Mr. Westbrook, I should not have spoken." "Please forgive me. I will go back to my work." "No," Richard said firmly but kindly. "Rosa, I know you. You've worked in this hotel for what, 3 years? You've never caused any trouble. You're one of our most reliable employees. Why would you risk everything to warn me?" Rosa bit her lip, clearly struggling with whether to speak. Finally, she took a deep breath. "Because I know what it is like to lose everything because of people you trust, sir. And I could not stay quiet and watch it happen to someone who has always treated me with respect." Richard felt a chill run down his spine. "Tell me everything, please." Rosa glanced at her watch. It was 3:47 in the afternoon. "Not here. Too many ears. There is a service break room on the 38th floor. No one uses it after 3 o'clock. Meet me there in 5 minutes. Come alone." Richard nodded and waited as Rosa took the service elevator. He used the executive elevator, his mind spinning with questions. When he reached the break room, Rosa was already there, sitting at a small table with a folder in front of her. "Sit, please." She gestured to the chair across from her. Richard sat down, noticing that Rosa's hands were shaking slightly. "Mr. Westbrook, what I am about to tell you I should not know. But when you clean rooms and offices late at night, people forget you are there. They think a maid is invisible." "Go on," Richard urged. Rosa opened the folder and pulled out several photographs taken on a phone. The images were grainy but clear enough. They showed documents on Vincent's desk, emails on his computer screen, bank statements. 3 weeks ago, I was cleaning Mr. Hayes's office at 11:32 at night. I thought he had left for the day, but he came back with a woman. They did not see me because I was in his private bathroom, cleaning the mirror. They started talking about you, about the merger. Richard leaned forward, his heart pounding. What woman? Rosa pulled out another photo. It showed Vincent embracing an elegant blonde woman in expensive clothing. Her name is Catherine Russo. She used to work here as the marketing director, remember? You fired her 2 years ago for embezzling funds. Richard's eyes widened. Catherine. I remember. She tried to steal $500,000 from the marketing budget. We didn't press charges because she returned the money and resigned quietly. She is back, Mr. Westbrook, and she is working with Mr. Hayes. Rosa's voice dropped to barely a whisper. They are lovers, and they have been planning this for a very long time. Richard felt sick. Vincent was like a brother to him. They had built the Westbrook hotel chain together from nothing, starting with one small bed and breakfast in Vermont 12 years ago. What's their plan? Rosa pulled out more photos. The merger contract you are about to sign, it is not what you think. There are hidden clauses that transfer ownership differently than what you were told. That's impossible. Richard shook his head. I've had 3 different law firms review that contract. Every page, every word. They reviewed the version you were shown, Rosa said, pulling out another document. But this is the real version, the one that will be filed with the state after you sign. I took this photo on Mr. Hayes's computer 4 days ago. Richard took the photo and zoomed in on his phone. The more he read, the more his blood ran cold. According to this version of the contract, Richard would retain only 15% ownership of the merged company, not the 51% he had negotiated. The majority would go to a shell corporation called Russo Holdings International. Russo Holdings, Richard whispered. Catherine's company. Yes, sir. Mr. Hayes owns 40% of it. Together, they will control 85% of your entire hotel empire. You will have almost nothing. Richard slumped back in his chair, the betrayal hitting him like a physical blow. How? How did they manage to create 2 versions without anyone noticing? Rosa pulled out more photos. Mr. Hayes has been paying people, sir. He paid someone in the lawyer's office to show you the fake version. He paid someone at Continental Holdings to coordinate the timing. Everyone you trusted to review the contract was either fooled or bought. Why are you telling me this, Rosa? Richard looked into her eyes. You could lose your job. Vincent will know someone warned me. Rosa's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. Because 12 years ago, my family owned a small restaurant in Queens. We worked so hard, my parents, my brother, and me. Then my brother's best friend, someone we trusted like family, convinced my parents to sign a partnership agreement to expand the restaurant. We were so excited. She paused, wiping her eyes. The contract was fake, just like yours. His friend stole everything. The restaurant, the building, our savings. My father had a heart attack from the stress. He died 3 months later. My mother never recovered. She passed away the next year. My brother and I were left with nothing but debt. Richard reached across the table and gently took her hand. Rosa, I'm so sorry. I was 17, Mr. Westbrook. I had to drop out of school to work. I could not go to college. I could not become the teacher I dreamed of being. All because we trusted the wrong person. She looked at him with fierce determination. When I heard Mr. Hayes and that woman laughing about how they were going to trick you the same way, I knew I had to do something. You are a good man, Mr. Westbrook. You treat everyone with respect, from the CEOs in your boardroom to the maids cleaning your toilets. You do not deserve to be betrayed like this. Richard felt emotion welling up in his chest. Here was a woman who cleaned toilets for a living, who had lost everything, and she was risking the little she had to save him. Rosa, I need copies of everything you've found. Can you get them to me? Rosa nodded and pulled a flash drive from her pocket. Everything is here, sir. Photos, recordings, documents. I have been collecting evidence for 3 weeks, every time I clean Mr. Hayes's office late at night. He thinks I am just a stupid maid who doesn't understand English very well. But I understand everything. Richard took the flash drive with reverence, as if Rosa had just handed him a precious gem. You're not stupid, Rosa. You're brilliant. And brave. He stood up, his mind already racing with plans. I need you to do something for me. Go back to work like normal. Don't let Vincent or anyone else know we talked. Can you do that? Rosa stood as well. Yes, sir. But Mr. Westbrook, be careful. Mr. Hayes is dangerous. I heard him tell that woman that if you discover the plan, he has a backup. He will blame you for fraud, say you tried to steal from Continental Holdings. He has false documents ready to destroy your reputation. Let him try, Richard said grimly. Rosa, after today, things are going to change around here. And I promise you, your sacrifice won't be forgotten. Richard went straight to his private office, not the executive suite, but a small secure room he kept for confidential matters. He locked the door and plugged in Rosa's flash drive. For the next hour, he reviewed everything. The photos were damning, but the recordings were worse. Rosa had somehow managed to capture audio from Vincent's office. Richard heard his partner's voice, clear as day, talking to Catherine about their plan. Richard's always been too soft, Vincent's voice said on the recording. He actually cares what people think about him. That's why this will work. He'll sign because he wants to believe everyone is as honest as he is. Catherine's laugh was cold and calculating. I can't wait to see his face when he realizes he's lost everything. After he humiliated me by firing me, making me return that money, this is perfect revenge. It's not just revenge for you, darling, Vincent said. It's $300 million for us. We can disappear to Monaco, live like royalty. Richard can spend the rest of his life wondering how his best friend destroyed him. Richard had to stop the recording. He felt physically ill. 12 years of partnership, of brotherhood, of shared struggles and victories, all a lie. Or had Vincent changed? Had the temptation of such massive wealth corrupted him? Richard checked his watch. It was 5:12 in the afternoon. The boardroom was waiting. He had to make a decision. He could confront Vincent now, but without legal backing. It would be his word against Vincent's. He needed a different strategy. Richard called his personal lawyer, Martin Chen, someone Vincent had never met because Martin handled only Richard's private affairs, not company business. Martin, I need you at my office immediately. Don't tell anyone, including my secretary. Use the private entrance. This is urgent. Martin arrived 23 minutes later. Richard showed him everything Rosa had provided. Martin's face grew grimmer with each document. Richard, this is conspiracy to commit fraud on a massive scale. Vincent and this Catherine woman could go to prison for 10 years or more. I want to expose them, Richard said firmly. But I need to do it in a way that protects everyone else, the employees, the hotel guests, the legitimate investors in Continental Holdings who don't know they're being used as cover for this scheme. Martin thought for a moment. We need to set a trap. You need to go back to that boardroom and sign the contract. Richard stared at him. Are you insane? That's exactly what they want. Hear me out, Martin said, pulling out his laptop. You sign the contract, but immediately after, we file for an emergency injunction with the court, claiming fraud. We present all this evidence. The court will freeze all assets and transactions related to the merger. Vincent and Catherine won't be able to touch a penny. Then we bring in the FBI. The FBI? Richard's eyes widened. Richard, this isn't just business fraud. They're planning to move money across state lines, possibly internationally. That's federal wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy. This is way bigger than a contract dispute. Richard paced his office, thinking hard. If I sign and then immediately expose them, Vincent will know someone tipped me off. He'll go after Rosa. I can't let that happen. Then we protect her, Martin said firmly. I'll have her give a deposition tonight, under legal protection. By tomorrow morning, she'll be a protected witness. Vincent won't be able to touch her. Richard made his decision. All right, let's do it. But Martin, I want you in that boardroom when I sign. I want you to witness everything. At 6:31 in the evening, Richard walked back into the boardroom. Vincent looked relieved but also suspicious. Richard, you were gone for almost 3 hours. We were beginning to worry. I apologize, everyone, Richard said smoothly, taking his seat. I had some personal matters to attend to, but I'm ready now. Let's finish this. Mr. Carlson from Continental Holdings looked annoyed. Mr. Westbrook, this is highly irregular. We have schedules to keep. I understand, and again I apologize. Richard picked up his pen. Before we proceed, I'd like my personal attorney to witness the signing. Martin, please come in. Martin entered the room carrying his briefcase. Vincent's eyes narrowed. Richard, we have lawyers here already. Why do you need your personal attorney? Because this is the biggest deal of my life, Vincent. I want my own representation present. You can understand that, can't you, partner? Vincent forced a smile, but Richard could see tension in his jaw. Of course. Whatever makes you comfortable. Richard reviewed the contract one more time, though he now knew it was the fake version, the one designed to trick him. He looked at Vincent, at the man who had been his best friend for over a decade, and felt profound sadness. Then he thought of Rosa, risking everything to save a man who was essentially a stranger to her, simply because it was right. He thought of her parents, her brother, her lost dreams. He would not let Vincent and Catherine destroy anyone else. "All right," Richard said, his voice steady. "Let's make history." He signed his name with a flourish on every page. Vincent's smile grew wider with each signature. The Continental Holdings representatives looked pleased. The lawyers nodded in satisfaction. When the final page was signed, Vincent stood and raised his glass. "To the Westbrook Continental Partnership. To wealth beyond measure." "To wealth beyond measure," Richard repeated, but he didn't drink. As soon as the signing was complete, Martin stood up. "Gentlemen, I'm serving you all with a legal notice. As of 6:47 this evening, an emergency injunction has been filed with the federal court to freeze all transactions related to this merger, pending investigation of fraud." The room erupted in chaos. Vincent's face went pale, then red with fury. "What? Richard, what is this?" Mr. Carlson stood up angrily. "Mr. Westbrook, this is outrageous. We signed in good faith. And so did I, Mr. Carlson," Richard said calmly. "But not everyone at this table acted in good faith. Martin, please continue." Martin pulled documents from his briefcase. "We have evidence that the contract signed today differs substantially from the contract that was negotiated and reviewed. We have evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud, involving Mr. Vincent Hayes and Ms. Catherine Russo." At the mention of Catherine's name, Vincent lunged toward Richard. "You bastard! How did you find out?" Two security guards, whom Martin had positioned outside, entered the room immediately. "Mr. Hayes, I suggest you remain calm," Martin said firmly. "The FBI has been notified and agents are on their way. Anything you say can and will be used against you." Vincent's face twisted with rage and panic. "This is insane. Richard, we're partners, brothers. How can you do this to me?" "How can I?" Richard's voice was cold. "Vincent, you were planning to steal everything from me. Everything we built together, for money and a woman who's already proven she's a thief." "It was her idea," Vincent said desperately, realizing he was trapped. "Catherine came to me 6 months ago with the plan. I didn't want to do it at first, but she convinced me. Richard, please, we can work this out. I'll call it off. We'll destroy the fake contract." "It's too late for that," Richard said. "You made your choice. You chose betrayal over brotherhood. You chose theft over honor. And now you'll face the consequences." The FBI agents arrived at 7:09 that evening. They took statements from everyone in the room. Vincent was arrested on the spot, as was Catherine Russo, who had been apprehended at her apartment trying to flee to the airport. The Continental Holdings representatives were cleared of wrongdoing once they proved they had been deceived as well, shown the fake contract terms just like Richard had been. Over the next few days, the full scope of Vincent's betrayal became clear. He had been skimming money from company accounts for 2 years, hiding it in offshore accounts. He had sabotaged potential deals that would have been good for Richard but bad for his secret plans with Catherine. He had even tried to turn other employees against Richard with subtle rumors and manipulations. Through it all, Richard kept his promise to Rosa. She was placed under legal protection as a key witness. But Richard did more than that. 1 week after Vincent's arrest, Richard called a company-wide meeting in the hotel's grand ballroom. Every employee was required to attend, from executives to housekeeping staff. Rosa stood in the back, trying to be invisible as always. Richard took the stage and cleared his throat. The room fell silent. "As you all know, this past week has been turbulent for our company," Richard began. "My former partner Vincent Hayes has been arrested for fraud and conspiracy. This betrayal hurt me deeply, both personally and professionally. But in my darkest moment, I learned something important about courage and integrity." Richard gestured to the back of the room. "Rosa Martinez, please come up here." Rosa's eyes went wide with panic. She shook her head, but her supervisor gently pushed her forward. Slowly, reluctantly, Rosa walked down the aisle as hundreds of eyes followed her. When she reached the stage, Richard took her hand and helped her up. She stood beside him, trembling slightly. "This woman," Richard said to the crowd, "is a hero. Rosa works in housekeeping, a job that many people overlook or take for granted. But Rosa saw something wrong, something that would have destroyed this company and everyone's jobs. And she had the courage to speak up even though she risked everything to do so. The ballroom was utterly silent. Rosa's face was flushed with embarrassment, but Richard continued. Rosa tried to warn me about the betrayal before I signed a fraudulent contract. Because of her bravery, because of her integrity, this company was saved. Hundreds of jobs were protected, and I learned that the most important people in our lives aren't always the ones in expensive suits and corner offices. Sometimes they're the ones who clean those offices late at night, who see the truth that others try to hide. Richard turned to Rosa. Rosa, I learned something else about you this week. Before your family lost everything, you were planning to become a teacher. You had to drop out of school to work and support yourself. Is that correct? Rosa nodded, tears streaming down her face. Yes, sir. I was going to teach elementary school. I love children. Then that's what you're going to do, Richard said firmly. Effective immediately, the Westbrook Foundation is establishing a scholarship in your name. It will cover your complete education at any university you choose. You will get your teaching degree, Rosa. You will have your dream back. The ballroom erupted in thunderous applause. Rosa collapsed into Richard's arms, sobbing. Mr. Westbrook, I cannot. It is too much. It's not enough, Richard said softly, so only she could hear. You gave me back my life, Rosa. Let me help you reclaim yours. But Richard wasn't finished. He raised his hand for silence. That's not all. While Rosa is completing her education, she will remain on the company payroll as a special consultant to me personally. Her job will be to help me see things I might miss, to be a voice of honesty and integrity. And her salary will be $200,000 per year. The crowd gasped. Rosa's knees buckled and Richard had to support her. I don't understand, she whispered. Rosa, you saved my $300 million company from being stolen. You're worth every penny. And when you finish your degree, you'll have a choice. You can become a teacher and we'll support that dream fully. Or if you want, you can join Westbrook Hotels as our Director of Ethics and Employee Relations, ensuring that every employee in this company is treated with the respect and dignity they deserve. Rosa couldn't speak. She simply held on to Richard and cried tears of joy, disbelief, and relief. Over the next few months, the legal proceedings against Vincent and Catherine moved forward. The evidence Rosa had gathered was ironclad. Vincent pleaded guilty to fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement. He was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison and ordered to repay $12 million he had stolen. Catherine received 6 years for her role in the conspiracy. The Continental Holdings merger was restructured with honest terms, and Richard's company thrived even more than before. But the biggest changes happened in Richard's personal life, as he worked closely with Rosa, helping her transition into her new role and supporting her as she started college classes. He began to see her not just as the brave woman who had saved him, but as an extraordinary person he wanted in his life. Rosa was funny, insightful, kind, and wise beyond her years. She had suffered tremendous loss, but had never become bitter. She worked hard at her studies, often staying up until 2 or 3 in the morning to complete assignments while also fulfilling her consulting duties. Richard found himself thinking about her constantly. One evening, 6 months after Vincent's arrest, Richard was working late in his office when Rosa knocked on his door. It was 9:44 at night. Come in, Richard called. Rosa entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. I saw your light on. I thought you might need this. You have been working too hard, Mr. Westbrook. Rosa, how many times do I have to tell you? Call me Richard. He accepted the coffee gratefully. And you're one to talk about working too hard. You took 3 exams this week and still came in every day. Rosa sat down across from him with a tired smile. I love it, though. School, I mean. I had forgotten how much I love learning. You're going to be an amazing teacher, Richard said warmly. Those kids don't know how lucky they'll be. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping coffee. Then Richard set down his cup and looked at her seriously. Rosa, can I ask you something personal? Of course, Richard. Why did you never marry? You're beautiful, intelligent, kind. I can't imagine you lacked for admirers. Rosa looked down at her coffee, a sad smile on her face. After my parents died, after we lost everything, I had to focus on survival. Working 2 jobs, taking care of my younger brother until he finished school. Romance seemed like a luxury I could not afford. And then, I suppose I became afraid. Afraid to trust anyone. Afraid to let someone close enough to hurt me the way my family was hurt. Richard nodded slowly. I understand that fear now. After Vincent's betrayal, I questioned every relationship in my life. Wondered who else might be using me, lying to me. But you cannot live that way, Rosa said softly, meeting his eyes. Always suspicious, always afraid. That is not living. That is just surviving. And you, Richard Westbrook, deserve more than survival. You deserve joy. So do you, Richard said, his voice barely above a whisper. Rosa, these past 6 months, working with you, getting to know you, I've realized something. You didn't just save my company. You saved me. You showed me what real courage looks like, what true integrity means. You made me want to be a better man. Rosa's breath caught in her throat. She could see where this was going, and her heart began to race. Richard, I am just a maid. No, Richard said firmly, standing up and walking around the desk to kneel beside her chair. You're not just anything. You're Rosa Martinez, the bravest person I've ever met. You're brilliant, you're kind, you're everything I didn't know I was looking for. And I don't care about where you came from or what your job was. I care about who you are. He took her hands in his. Rosa, I'm falling in love with you. Actually, I think I've been falling in love with you since the moment you whispered that warning in my ear. You saved my life in every way a person can be saved. Tears rolled down Rosa's cheeks. Richard, we are from different worlds. Your family, your friends, they will never accept someone like me. Then they don't have to be part of our world, Richard said simply. Rosa, I lost my best friend to greed and betrayal. I learned that the people I thought were my friends, many of them only cared about my money and status. But you cared about doing the right thing even when you had nothing to gain and everything to lose. That's the kind of person I want in my life. That's the kind of person I want to build a future with. I love you too, Rosa whispered. I have been afraid to admit it even to myself. You are kind and good, and you make me believe that good things can still happen. Richard stood and pulled her up with him, wrapping his arms around her. They kissed, tender and sweet, and in that moment, both of them felt like they had finally come home. The next year was a whirlwind of happiness. Rosa excelled in her classes and graduated with honors from her teaching program. Richard proposed to her at her graduation ceremony, in front of all her classmates and professors, getting down on one knee and presenting her with a simple but beautiful diamond ring. Rosa Martinez, he said, his voice ringing out clear and strong. You warned me not to sign that paper, and in doing so, you changed my entire life. Now I'm asking you to sign a different paper. Marry me. Be my wife, my partner, my best friend. Build a life with me. Rosa said yes, and the crowd erupted in cheers. They married 3 months later in a beautiful but modest ceremony. Rosa wore a simple white dress that made her look like an angel, and Richard couldn't take his eyes off her. Instead of a big reception at a fancy hotel, they celebrated at the community center in Queens, where Rosa had volunteered for years, surrounded by the families she had helped and the people who had supported her through her hardest times. But the biggest surprise came during their honeymoon in Costa Rica. They were walking on the beach at sunset when Rosa turned to Richard with tears in her eyes. I have something to tell you. I have been afraid to say it because it is so soon, but I cannot keep it secret. Richard's heart began to pound. What is it? Are you okay? I am pregnant, Rosa said, her voice shaking with joy and fear. We are going to have a baby. Richard let out a whoop of pure happiness and lifted Rosa off her feet, spinning her around as she laughed. A baby. We're going to have a baby. He set her down gently and placed his hand on her stomach. Rosa, you've given me so much already, and now this. I'm the luckiest man alive. 9 months later, Rosa gave birth to a healthy baby girl. They named her Elena Maria after Rosa's mother. Richard held his daughter in the hospital room, looking at her tiny, perfect face, and felt gratitude so profound it brought tears to his eyes. He thought about the moment Rosa had whispered in his ear, warning him about the trap. If she had stayed silent, if she had been too afraid to speak up, none of this would exist. He would have lost his company, his fortune, everything. He never would have known real love. He never would have held his daughter. Thank you, he whispered to Rosa, who was resting in the hospital bed, watching him with their baby. Thank you for being brave. Thank you for saving me, Rosa smiled, exhausted but radiantly happy. Thank you for listening. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible to everyone else. 5 years later, the Westbrook Hotel empire had grown even larger, but Richard had changed how he ran his business. He implemented new policies ensuring fair wages and benefits for all employees, from executives to cleaning staff. He created scholarship programs for employees' children. He established an anonymous tip line where anyone could report suspected fraud or mistreatment without fear of retaliation. Rosa had become a beloved elementary school teacher at a school in Queens, where children from low-income families adored her. She understood their struggles because she had lived them. But she also served on the board of Westbrook Hotels, using her voice to advocate for workers' rights and ethical business practices. Vincent served his prison time and was released after 6 years for good behavior. Richard received a letter from him, filled with apologies and requests for forgiveness. Richard thought long and hard about whether to respond. In the end, he wrote back with a short message. "I forgive you, Vincent, but forgiveness doesn't mean trust. You made your choices. Now live with the consequences. I hope you find peace, but you'll find it without me." Catherine Russo disappeared after her release, last seen boarding a plane to South America. Richard heard rumors that she had tried to run another scam and ended up in a Brazilian prison, but he never confirmed it. He had moved on from that dark chapter of his life. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Richard and Rosa sat on the balcony of their home in upstate New York, watching their 3 children play in the yard. Elena was 9 now, with her mother's dark eyes and her father's smile. Their son Marco was 6, wild and energetic. And their youngest, little Sophia, was 3, toddling after her siblings with determined steps. "Do you ever think about that day?" Richard asked Rosa, holding her hand. "The day you warned me?" Rosa nodded. "Sometimes. I was so scared. My hands were shaking when I pushed that cart into the boardroom. I almost didn't say anything. I almost just stayed silent and invisible like I was supposed to." "I'm so glad you didn't," Richard said, kissing her hand. "You changed both our lives that day. You saved me, and in a way, I like to think I saved you too." "You did," Rosa said softly. "You gave me back my dreams, my dignity, my hope. You showed me that good men still exist in the world, that trust is possible, that love is real." They sat in peaceful silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. From invisible maid to beloved wife and mother, from cynical millionaire to devoted husband and father, 2 people from different worlds had collided at exactly the right moment, and both their lives had been transformed forever. All because a poor maid had the courage to whisper a warning, and a millionaire had the wisdom to listen. What did you think of Rosa and Richard's story? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate this story? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to keep up with all our stories. And check out more inspiring stories by clicking right here on the screen.